Thank you for joining us as we explore this episode of Into the Killing. If you followed our previous analyses, you know we often revisit cold cases that later find resolution. Should you know of a compelling true crime story or paranormal event, please visit our website, christ.com, and navigate to the suggested case section. Here, you can submit cases for our 2 YouTube channels, one dedicated to crime, the other to the paranormal, by simply using the drop-down menu. Today, we travel back to July of 1982, a historic month in sports and crime alike. On the 8th of July, during the FIFA World Cup semifinals, West Germany faced France in a match remembered as one of the most dramatic in tournament history. The game was fiercely contested, ending in a 3-all tie after regulation and extra time, leading to the tournament's first-ever penalty shootout in a knockout stage. Penalty shootouts had been introduced in the 1978 tournament but had not yet been used. Previously, tied matches after extra time resulted in a rematch. In this intense shootout, goalkeeper Harald Schumacher represented West Germany, while Jean-Louis Atoir guarded the French goal. Both teams scored 4 times, but Schumacher saved a shot from France's 6th kicker, Maxime Bossis, while West Germany's 6th shooter, Horst Rubens, converted his attempt past Atoir. This clinched the victory for West Germany, sending them to the finals, where they ultimately lost to Italy with a score of 1-0. Since that match, 35 penalty shootouts have decided World Cup knockout ties, including the final in 2022, when Argentina defeated France 4-2 in penalties. These shootouts have decided the World Cup champion 3 times, also in 1994 and 2006. On July 15th of 1982, children playing along the banks of the Green River in Seattle discovered a floating, decomposed body. The victim was later identified as 16-year-old Wendy Caulfield, last seen a week earlier when she left her foster home. Tragically, she had been strangled to death. At the time, investigators were unaware that her murder was among the earliest linked to the notorious Green River Killer, responsible for a series of murders spanning from 1982 to 1998. During this period, the killer preyed on young women, many of whom were runaways or sex workers, and frequently disposed of their bodies in the Green River, earning him his infamous nickname. Just weeks after Wendy's body was found, authorities formed a task force to catch the perpetrator, enlisting help from an unexpected source, serial killer Ted Bundy, who was on death row in Florida. Bundy offered insights into the killer's possible behaviors, speculating that he might revisit and perform sexual acts on the victims' bodies. In November of 2001, Gary Ridgway, later known as the Green River Killer, was arrested at the Kenworth truck plant, where he had worked as a painter for 3 decades. DNA evidence from 4 victims linked him to their murders, and subsequent investigations connected him to 3 additional victims, revealing a chilling pattern of violence. In 1983, Kenworth plant worker Gary Ridgway initially confessed to having committed 71 murders. At that point, authorities could only link him to 48 of these crimes. Intriguingly, Ridgway's behavior suggested he returned to the crime scenes, often revisiting the victims to engage in sexual acts with their decomposing bodies before their remains became unrecognizable, a disturbing detail aligning with Ted Bundy's foresight. Although Ridgway was a suspect early on, passing a polygraph test masked his involvement, and he was not detained immediately. Decades later, on November 5th of 2003, Ridgway accepted a plea bargain to evade the death penalty. In exchange for pleading guilty to 48 counts of aggravated first-degree murder, he received a sentence of 48 consecutive life terms, with the possibility of parole. A key condition of this agreement was his cooperation in guiding investigators to any additional bodies concealed along the river. In 2011, the remains of another victim were found, confirming her as the 49th confirmed victim of the Green River Killer. Currently, Ridgway, aged 75, serves his sentence at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. While his exact victim count remains uncertain, estimates suggest he may have murdered around 80 women, with 49 confirmed, making him the second most prolific American serial killer. Samuel Little holds the record for the most confirmed victims among U.S. serial killers. Meanwhile, on July 20th, in 1982, British military ceremonies in Hyde Park and Regent's Park in London were marred by devastating bombings. Improvised explosive devices detonated simultaneously, claiming the lives of 4 soldiers from the Blues and Royals Cavalry Regiment, along with 7 military horses. An additional 28 civilians suffered injuries. In Regent's Park, 7 bandsmen from the Royal Green Jackets were killed, and 31 civilians wounded. The Irish Republican Army claimed responsibility, citing anger over Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's comments about the Falklands War, which Britain had entered several months earlier. 5 years later, in October of 1987, investigations linked the Hyde Park bombing to a young Northern Irish man, Gilbert Danny McNam, an electronic engineer aged 27. He was sentenced to 25 years imprisonment for his involvement. However, in 1998, McNam was released under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, aimed at ending decades of violence. His release sparked controversy when 3 appellate judges overturned his conviction, citing withheld fingerprint evidence. While this did not prove his innocence, it prevented his conviction due to insufficient evidence implicating him exclusively. In May of 2013, John Anthony Downey faced murder charges related to the Hyde Park attack. Throughout his trial, the defense pointed to a police letter sent in 2007, which advised Downey he would not face criminal prosecution. The judge declared that Downey had been misled and warned that prosecuting him would constitute an abuse of power. Notably, he was one of 187 IRA members who received such letters, effectively granting them unofficial immunity from prosecution. The legal case concluded in 2019 when the High Court affirmed the ruling. In 2052, Downey faced potential lawsuits from the families of victims whose memorials had been erected in Hyde Park and Regent's Park to honor those lost in the attacks. Despite the ongoing tragedies, no one had ever been charged in connection with the Regent's Park bombing that occurred on July 17, 1982. That same day, the hit song was "Don't You Want Me" by the Human League, an iconic synth-pop track heralded by Rolling Stone magazine as the breakthrough hit of the second British invasion. Meanwhile, Steven Spielberg's film E.T. the Extraterrestrial held the top spot at the box office. On July 17, 1982, a group of hikers was exploring Mount Rose in Washoe County, Nevada. This dormant volcano, the 3rd tallest peak in the Carson Mountain Range, lies between Reno and Lake Tahoe, straddling the Nevada-California border. During their trek, Around sheep's flag on the lakeside slope of the mountain, the hikers made a chilling discovery. A fully clothed woman's body, face down, with a pair of men's underwear draped over her head. She had been shot twice in the back of the head, likely while bent over or tying her shoes, according to authorities. The medical examiner estimated she had been dead for less than a day and found evidence suggesting she had been sexually assaulted. Strangely, she carried no identification, and searches of the nearby area yielded no additional belongings matching her description. She did not correspond to any missing person reports, leaving her identity a mystery. After the discovery, authorities issued a plea for assistance, describing her as a woman between 25 and 35 years old, white, 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighing approximately 112 pounds. She had long brown hair styled in a bun, hazel eyes, and a vaccination scar on her upper left arm. The medical examiner noted she had given birth at least once and bore a scar on her abdomen, likely from a cesarean section. Despite pursuing 30 promising leads in the weeks after the shooting, police remained unable to identify her or determine who had murdered her. Without knowing her identity, the pool of suspects remained broad, ranging from romantic partners and jealous rivals to other possible enemies. This tragic case underscored the difficulty of solving crimes when victims remain anonymous, forcing investigators to grapple with the absence of vital clues that could illuminate the motives and perpetrator behind such heinous acts. In all her knowledge, the woman's identity remained elusive. Her case was as enigmatic as a stranger's murder, a type notoriously difficult to solve. She was laid to rest in September of 1982 in a cemetery north of Reno, with no funeral service, only the gravediggers in attendance. 2 weeks later, a small gathering of 7 individuals held a memorial for this unknown woman, mourning her silent loss. Despite their grief, authorities focused on initial leads, one of which the medical examiner considered significant. Based on her dental work, the woman appeared to be European or had once lived in Europe. The examiner noted that her vaccination scar resembled those commonly seen in Germany. This detail prompted police to contact Interpol and Scotland Yard, yet no progress resulted from these efforts. Canadian authorities were also checked to match her with missing persons reports, but there was no record fitting her description. As a result, the case went cold, leaving her still unidentified, known only as the Sheep's Flat Jane Doe. Occasionally, local newspapers like the Reno Gazette-Journal published updates, fueling hopes that someone missed her and would come forward. But as decades slipped by, no new clues emerged. The brutal crime of her rape and murder remained unsolved despite ongoing efforts. In the late 1990s, investigators finally obtained a full DNA profile from the evidence, which was entered into state and national databases, but no match appeared. This profile was also shared with Interpol and Scotland Yard, yet the killer remained a shadowy figure. An independent review in 2010 challenged earlier assumptions about European dental work, refocusing the police on the possibility that she was from somewhere in North America, possibly the western United States. This theory was supported by the fact that her T-shirt was only sold in that region, but identification still eluded them. The case persisted without progress until 2018, nearly 36 years after her death. In that time, much had changed. Popular culture had evolved from the hit movies of 1982, such as E.T., The Extraterrestrial, Tootsie and an Officer and a Gentleman, to the blockbuster successes like Avengers, Infinity War, and Black Panther. The biggest music hits of 1982 included Olivia Newton-John's Physical, Survivor's Eye of the Tiger, and Joan Jett's I Love Rock and Roll. By 2018, the top singles were God's Plan by Drake, Perfect by Ed Sheeran, and Meant to Be by BB Rexha featuring Florida Georgia Line. Meanwhile, television saw the debut of major shows like Cheers, Square Pegs, and The Late Show with David Letterman. A reminder of how much the world had transformed since her tragic end in 1982. In 1982, Iman made his debut on NBC, occupying the time slot immediately following Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. When Carson retired in 1993, many believed that Letterman would succeed him as host. Iman, who had frequently guest hosted The Tonight Show, was considered a strong contender for the permanent role. Instead, the hosting position went to Jay Leno, prompting Iman to switch networks and launch The Late Show with David Iman on CBS. His aim was to compete directly with Leno's Tonight Show. Iman retired from The Late Show in 2015, and Stephen Core took over as host in 2018. In that same year, Netflix premiered a new talk show titled My Next Guest Needs No Introduction with David Iman. Other popular series debuting in 2018 included Yellowstone and Blue. Among the best-selling books from 1982 were The BFG by Roald Dahl, The Running Man by Stephen King, published under the pseudonym Richard Bachman, and Foundation's Edge by Isaac Asimov. The latter was a sequel to Asimov's original Foundation trilogy, completed nearly 3 decades earlier in 1953. The trilogy was immensely popular, and Asimov was pressured and generously compensated to expand the series. In 1982, he published Foundation's Edge, marking his first appearance on the New York Times bestseller list after drafting a total of 262 books over a career spanning 44 years. Following Foundation's Edge, Asimov authored 3 additional books set in the same universe. In 2018, notable books included Heather Morris's The Tattooist of Auschwitz, Malene Miller's Circe, and Delilah Owens. During this period, the world of video games saw releases such as Miss Pac-Man, Burger Time, and Q-Bird as arcade titles. That same year, major game releases included Red Dead Redemption 2, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Detective Pikachu in February. The annual gathering of the American Forensic Sciences was held in Seattle, Washington, where a criminalist from Washoe County's Forensic Division attended a lecture by Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, a pioneering genetic genealogist and co-founder of the DNA Doe Project. Her presentation covered the process of identifying John and Jane Does through genetic genealogy. The criminalist was struck by her account, and months later, in April, submitted DNA evidence from a Jane Doe found at Sheep's Flat. The DNA was sent to a private laboratory and uploaded to an online database. Using genetic genealogy, GEDmatch connected the profile to John and Bland Salvini from Detroit, Michigan. They had 3 children, including a daughter named Mary E. Salvini, born on September 29, 1948. This made her almost 33 years old in July of 1982, placing her within the age range of the Sheep's Flat Jane Doe. Records showed that Mary, who had given birth in 1972, likely placed her child for adoption. Further investigations revealed that Mary was arrested in Detroit in 1974. The woman was detained for loitering, but since police still had her fingerprints on file, they compared them to those found at the crime scene, a Jane Doe's flat, and confirmed her identity as Mary Salvini. Remarkably, Mary had never been officially reported missing. Born and raised in Detroit, she lived with her father and two brothers after her mother left when she was young. Her mother spent most of her life institutionalized and died in 1980. Their father passed away in 1974 when Mary was just 16. After his death, and sometime before her murder, she moved to California. Little is known about her life there, though her brother Charles Salvini, who later died by suicide in 1982 in San Diego at age 34, was her closest family connection. Charles's own life was tumultuous. In January of 1972, he had participated in a bar robbery in Fresno that resulted in the death of the bar's owner, a 40-year-old man named Ezra Zacharias. The crime went unsolved until 2 decades later, when the getaway driver identified Charles and another man, Thomas Joseph Zacharias. Zacharias was convicted of murder in January of 2003, 31 years after the crime, and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Meanwhile, Charles's own life ended tragically, just 3 months after his sister's murder. Mary's other brother, who married in Detroit and fathered a son, left his family when his son was 4. Like his siblings, he moved west to California, later settling in Oregon, where he died in 2013 at 72. Estranged from the family, he never reported Mary missing. Her closest living relative is now Robert's son, Robert Jr., who had never met her. On May 7, 2019, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department announced they had identified the woman known as the Sheep's flat Jane Doe as Mary Salvini. They also revealed they had solved her murder through genetic genealogy, ultimately locating her killer as James Richard Curry. Curiously, Curry's family was connected by his mother's maiden name, Salvini. Born in 1946 in Bro, Texas, Curry served a 20-year prison sentence beginning in 1970 when convicted of armed robbery. He was released after serving roughly 7 years. Afterwards, he moved to Waco, California, working as a locksmith. A fellow locksmith, James Ditt Robinson, was involved in a personal injury lawsuit settlement of $100,000 in 1976, after which he briefly acquired property before selling it in June of 1977. Robinson then mysteriously disappeared. He was neither reported missing nor investigated by police. Following this, Curry became the manager of a storage facility in Santa Clara. On July 17th, in 1982, both Curry and 33-year-old Mary Salvini were in Washoe County, Nevada. Exactly why they were both there remains unclear. The body of Mary Salvini was discovered near Mount Rose, approximately 250 miles from Santa Clara, suggesting she may have traveled with Curry or known him before her death. Little more is known about her time in California, but the proximity of the locations hints at some prior connection. On the morning of January 2nd, in 1983, the body of 34-year-old Sharon Nova Salad was discovered near Crystal Springs Reservoir in San Mateo County, California. She had been raped and shot in the head, her tragic death shocking the community. Just 2 hours later, her husband, 39-year-old Gerald Nova Salad, was found dead inside their apartment by a friend. The couple owned a storage facility in San Jose, and a witness reported that the day before their deaths, he had seen a woman run across Highway 92 to escape a man wielding a gun, who then chased her. Since the man had a firearm, the witness decided not to stop but attempted to find a phone instead. When unsuccessful, he returned to the area later, but neither the man nor the woman were visible. However, he noticed a yellow Lincoln Continental parked on the roadside. James Curry, who knew the couple through their work at two storage units just 2 miles apart, also owned a yellow Lincoln. On January 4th, 2 days after the double murder, police summoned 36-year-old Curry for questioning. During the interview, he confessed to being the killer. Curry revealed that his motive stemmed from an incident that occurred over a year earlier, around Christmas of 1981. He explained that he attended the same company Christmas party as Gerald and Sharon, where Gerald, intoxicated and rude, insulted the employer, upsetting Curry. Over a year later, on New Year's Day in 1983, Gerald contacted Curry, seeking to buy a .45 caliber handgun. Curry went to their apartment with the weapon, and Gerald, seated in a recliner, asked how it functioned. Curry cocked the gun and shot Gerald in the head. He then assaulted Sharon sexually, took $400 from their apartment, and planned to drive her to the airport and force her onto a plane. En route, Curry stopped the car to urinate. Sharon seized the opportunity and fled, prompting Curry to chase her, assault her sexually again, and ultimately shoot her in the head. Curry's confession extended further. He described how he had an acquaintance, Richard Lemon, 38, who stored some of his belongings, among them a truck and 2 motorcycles, at Curry's storage facility. By early 1982, Lemon had become useless to Curry, especially his motorcycles. Curry instructed Lemon to come to the storage unit on February 17, 1982. During that visit, Curry shot Lemon once in the head with a .38 caliber pistol, then placed Lemon's body into a crate, sealing it inside the storage unit. Curry claimed the body remained there. He also revealed that he had given one of Lemon's motorcycles to his son. Police recovered Richard Lemon's body from the storage unit on January 6, 1983, just after Curry's confession. Tragically, 2 days after revealing his crimes, Curry committed suicide by hanging himself in his jail cell using a mattress cover. James Richard Curry was discovered relatively quickly after he hanged himself. Rescuers managed to take him down before he ceased breathing. An attempt at resuscitation was made by a correctional officer, but Curry remained unconscious. He was promptly transported to a hospital, where he was admitted to the intensive care unit. While in a coma, authorities continued their investigation, searching storage units connected to him. During this search, they uncovered personal belongings stolen from customers at the facility. They also recovered a .38 caliber gun, the murder weapon used to kill Richard Lemon. This firearm belonged to James Dwee Robinson, a friend of Curry's who had vanished 5 years earlier. Additional evidence linked to Robinson was found, including old checkbooks and legal documents, yet his body was never located. Despite police suspicions that Curry might not have been directly involved in Robinson's disappearance, they considered it more plausible that Curry had murdered him, possibly disposing of or concealing the body while stealing his possessions and likely his money. Because Curry remained in a coma, authorities were unable to question him about Robinson's fate. On January 7, 1983, at the age of 36, Curry was taken off life support and pronounced dead a few hours later. Law enforcement authorities speculate that Curry may have been responsible for more than the 5 murders officially linked to him, though the full extent of his crimes remains uncertain. What is certain is that the 2 county sheriff's department regards Richard Curry's involvement in the murder of Mary Salvini as closed.